Welcome, folks. Today we are going to be talking about how to revive a starter and if you can actually use a starter right out of the fridge to bake delicious bread. So as you can see here, I've got this starter that was put in the fridge on October 24th. Today is January 14th. So you're looking at 82 days. That's almost 3 months of this starter being in my refrigerator. And as you can see, I've got a big layer there of liquid sitting on top of the spent flour. Now, that's often referred to as hooch. See how it's kind of dark, grayish, slightly pinkish, right? And you're looking at, that's I don't know, quarter-inch layer that's sitting on top of that spent flour. So some people will just stir it all together and start baking with it. However, that doesn't yield very good results, in my opinion, versus using like a nice frothy, ready to go starter, right? Who's nice and bubbly, right? So this one will have a beautiful aroma, slightly nutty, sweet. This one smells like vinegar because the acidic acid has overly produced in its numbers. So if you mix that into a dough, you're definitely going to get a sour flavor. However, that may not work out very well with your dough. Let me explain. So assuming that you've done all the mixing, kneading, folding, shaping correctly right before you baked your loaf, and you're finding that it just didn't quite rise right, or it's showing signs of overproofed, so the top layer of the skin of the dough is kind of cracking or feels a little dense when you're handling it. All of those signs are the fact that the dough itself just isn't retaining the carbon dioxide that is being produced by your starter, in specifically the wild yeast. Now, what's happening with the bacteria part of your sourdough starter is it's continuing to work, right? It's continuing to create that acidic acid byproduct as it ferments the flour. So as it's creating that byproduct, which is acidic acid, think of it as you've worked really hard and created this beautiful elastic dough, and it fills up like a balloon with the CO2 gas from the yeast. As you start to produce more and more acidic acid, it's almost like eroding that layer of elasticity or gluten structure of your dough itself. So you have the analogy of the balloon, and now you're popping tiny little holes with a pin, and eventually it'll just deflate and won't be able to hold any more carbon dioxide. So that might be an issue if you're finding that your dough just isn't really working well, because potentially your sourdough starter isn't active enough and the numbers of bacteria to yeast are maybe off, so it's not balanced well enough to be able to rise your dough. So keep these things in mind. We want to start building a strong foundation for a successful bake. Now, if I've been on vacation or neglecting my sourdough starter, and that's okay, it happens. So what do I do to can I revive this and use it? I'm going to show you how, because yes, you can. All right, welcome to my sink. Here in the kitchen, I have a bin that's dedicated for my chickens. Hi, lovely ladies. And you can see how on the floor there is the residual of what they didn't eat. But that's okay, they'll eat it tomorrow. Moving on, the chicken seed that I have here, I ferment with my spent sourdough starter, and you could do the same. Great probiotic for your chickens and any kitchen scraps, of course. They always appreciate. So you see how I dumped all of that hooch off, or that byproduct that's super acidic, and any leftover spent flour that will pour easily is now gone. All right, now that most of all of that starter is now gone, I'm going to what's called wash my starter. So in normal times, I would just fill this up with water. However, I'm going to give you more of an exact measurement so that you see what I'm doing and explain why. So I'll fill my cup up here with about 100 grams of water. Let's see where we're at. Oh, look at that. Pretty close. Okay. So I'm going to dump that in there. And I'm going to stir it up, trying to capture that starter and that culture, meaning those probiotic microbes, and get them in that water column. Now you may ask, why 100 grams? That's because I normally feed my starter 50 grams of water, 50 grams of starter, and 50 grams of flour. So I have a 150 gram starter. So if I dump most of it out, what I've noticed is what's left clinging to the bottom and the sides of the jar is about 50 grams. So I'm in essence doubling the amount. I'm diluting it by half. Now I use a brand new jar, which these wide mouth, let's see, 2-cup jars. I'll put the link of the description below in case you want to pick some up. They're great because one, let me show you a comparison here. A normal quart jar is, I found, a little too tall for me when I'm trying to mix it with a chopstick. You see here, the ergonomics of it, I can only really hold on to the top third of the chopstick, right? So it's harder on my wrist to mix versus here, I can hold on to half of that chopstick and really give me a solid handle in order to mix my starter. And obviously with a smaller size, there's less to clean. And obviously the wide mouth will give you a larger surface area to work in versus the more narrow regular mouth. All right, moving on. All right, we're zeroing out the scale. I've got my starter that's been diluted, and I'm gonna measure out 100 grams. There you go, on the money. Now you can feed a starter pretty much any type of flour. I'm using a bread flour. All-purpose flour will work just fine. Whole wheat, whole rye, all those will give you nuanced flavors as well. But for now, I'm just looking for straight bread flour so that I can feed it the sugar it needs to get healthy and strong once again. All right, so here we go, 150 gram total. So again, we'll have 50 parts water, 50 parts starter, and 50 parts flour. Now, this will actually mix quite easily because the starter was already diluted. So it's not going to give me a thick paste like normally. And that's okay because the runnier a starter is, let me rephrase that. The more hydrated, meaning more water, a starter has, the easier it is for it to ferment. The matrix is well hydrated, or lots of water, so those microbes can travel from molecule of flour to molecule of flour quite easily. All right, and there you go. So now this will rest on my countertop, and I will check it. And when I see it rise to its maximum peak, which I know in this jar with this quantity is about here, and it does that within 6 to 8 hours, I know I can use this starter to bake. If you have questions or comments, leave them down below. Have a wonderful day, everyone. This has been Norris with Sourdough Delight, wishing you an awesome bake day.